This is case number IT-0484, the prosecutor against Ramush Haradinaj, Idriz Balaj, and Lahi Brahimaj.
I thank you. Good morning to you. Mr. Haradinaj, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I want to make sure before I proceed any further that you can follow the proceedings in your own language or in a language that you understand.
Thank you very much. Here.
I am not receiving interpretation myself. And could you repeat, please?
Yes, everything is okay. Translation is okay, and I'm hearing it.
If at any moment in the course during the proceedings you're not receiving interpretation, please draw my attention immediately. And the same applies to the other two. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Balaj. Good morning to you too. Same question. Can you follow the proceedings in a language that you can understand?
Yes.
Okay, I think you may sit down. Mr. Brahimaj. Good morning to you. And it's the same question.
Yes, good morning.
Are you receiving interpretation in a language that you understand?
Yes.
You may sit down. Let's have appearances for the prosecution.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Hildegard Özretzlaff. I represent the prosecution today, and I'm accompanied by case manager Hassan Yunus.
I thank you and good morning to you and your team. Now, appearances for Mr. Haradinaj.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Rodney Dixon. I appear to represent Mr. Haradinaj. Thank you, Your Honor.
And have you been appointed to represent him throughout all the proceedings, or are you just a duty counsel for today, for the initial appearance only, in other words?
Your Honor, I am one of the lawyers who's been appointed to represent him in the proceedings from today and onwards. So I'm not a duty counsel appointed by the registrar. I
thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And good morning to you. Appearances for Mr. Balaj.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Gregor Guy Smith. I have been appointed as duty counsel at this time to represent Mr. Balaj.
I thank you, sir, and good morning to you. Appearances for Mr. Brahimaj.
Good morning, Your Honor. I am Richard Harvey, and I've been appointed as duty counsel for this morning to represent Mr. Brahimaj.
I thank you, and good morning to you too. Thank you. Before we proceed any further, I wish to make one point very clear, that and this is particularly addressed to the three accused, and that is that you, throughout the entire proceedings, you enjoy right to remain silent. Let me first give some details on the indictment. The three accused, that is Ramush Haradinaj, Idriz Balaj, and Lahi Brahimaj, are included in the indictment with case number IT-0484, which was signed on the 25th of February of this year. This indictment was confirmed by my colleague, Judge Lord Ian Bonomi, on the 4th of March 2005. The indictment was made public by a decision of the same judge, Lord Bonomi, of the 10th of March 2005. Previous to that, the indictment and everything that accompanied it, particularly the warrant of arrest, was under seal. Accused Ramush Haradinaj and Lahi Brahimaj turned themselves into the custody of this tribunal and arrived at the seat of this tribunal, as most of you would know, last week, precisely on the 9th of March of 2005. The third accused, Idriz Balaj, was transferred to The Hague later on the same day. There are the factual allegations which form the basis of this indictment, which I will go through very briefly, and then I will explain what the three accused are charged with. The indictment alleges that after the 24th of March of 1998, KLA forces, under the command and control of accused Ramush Haradinaj, mounted a systematic campaign to seize control of the area between villages of Glodjane and Decani, and particularly the villages of Dubrava, Rznic, Ratish, and Dajinovac, in order to drive ethnic Serbs out of the villages where they were living, and that they also continued to launch attacks against the camp of refugees of Babaloch near Decani. This camp, according to the prosecution, had been the target of similar KLA attacks since 1997. The indictment states that the KLA forces, under the command and control of Ramush Haradinaj, including the Black Eagles, under the direct control of Idriz Balaj, harassed, beat, or otherwise drove Serbian civilian and Roma Egyptian civilians out of these villages, and killed those civilians that remained behind or had refused to abandon their homes, and that they continued to mount similar attacks against the Serb and Roma civilians, as well as Albanian civilians perceived as collaborators. The indictment further states that many abductions by KLA forces took place in the Dukagjin zone, and that tens of civilians went missing. The indictment also alleges that the KLA forces, acting under the command and control of Ramush Haradinaj, had full control of the operational zone and did not tolerate the presence of any other Albanian factions fighting against the Serbs, such as the armed forces of the Republic of Kosovo. The indictment alleges also that in the second half of May 1998, a makeshift detention center was established at the KLA headquarters in Jablanica, and that between then and August 1998, at least 16 non-combatants were detained, beaten, and tortured. One is known to have died, while the others are still missing. The indictment also states that during the end, or round about the end of August and the beginning of September 1998, Serb forces temporarily retook the area surrounding Glodjane, and that a Serbian forensic crime scene team conducted an investigation in the vicinity of the canal leading to Lake Radonjic, the Ekonomia farm in Riznic, and a road leading to Dacinovac, where they identified at least 39 bodies and partial remains, human remains. Several of these remains have been identified as belonging to Serb, Roma, and civilian Albanian civilians who disappeared between April and September 98 in the Dukagjin area. The indictment alleges also that as commander of the Dukagjin operational zone, Ramush Haradinaj ensured that the KLA forces under his control operated in a structured and disciplined manner, provided overall control of planning and organization of operations, and established a system whereby individuals were targeted for abduction, mistreatment and murder, and whereby a systematic attack on vulnerable sections of the civilian population was carried out. The prosecution alleges also that by excluding all rival KLA forces, Haradinaj secured power for his own troops within his zone, and by attacking Serb forces in rural areas, gave his own troops freedom to dominate and persecute vulnerable sections of the civilian population. The prosecution alleges that he used his own house as a center of operations and used his other Haradinaj family member resources and the support of his family members to further the consolidation of his power and his persecution of civilians. The indictment alleges that Haradinaj appointed and maintained his co-accused in positions of responsibility and condoned and encouraged their criminal conduct and behavior in such position. It further states that on some occasions, Haradinaj personally ordered, controlled and participated in the beatings of persons detained by his forces and taking no active part in hostilities, and on other occasions by his presence and tacit or overt approval of such criminal conduct, he, in his position as commander, encouraged and instigated criminal behavior by members of his own forces. The indictment also alleges that Haradinaj controlled the continued detention or release or medical treatment of persons held by the KLA in his operational zone, that he participated in the abduction of persons who were later found murdered, and that on at least one occasion he gave his tacit approval as commander for detained persons to be executed. The indictment alleges that as commander of the Black Eagles Special Unit, Idriz Balaj worked closely with Haradinaj and provided direct operational support for his activities, and that he personally, and using soldiers under his command, repeatedly abducted, beat, mutilated, tortured and murdered civilians and detained persons, taking no active part in the hostilities. In addition, the prosecution alleges that he raped a Roma Egyptian woman, that he personally visited the Ablanica detention center, mutilated and tortured a prisoner there, and by his presence as a KLA commander, provided his tacit or overt approval for persecution and criminal conduct by other KLA soldiers. The prosecution alleges also that he knew that the facility was operating in a persecutory and criminal fashion. The indictment also states the accused Balaj attempted to prevent inquiry into and to conceal the abduction and murder of civilians and the disposal of the bodies at Radonjić Lake. The indictment finally alleges also that as deputy commander of the Dukagjin operative staff and the responsible local KLA commander, accused Lahi Brahimaj ran the KLA detention facility at Jablanica, ordered, supervised and participated in the beating and torture and murder of persons who were detained there, and that he personally abducted one civilian and took him to the Jablanica detention facility, where he was repeatedly beaten, and then personally took him from the detention facility to a potential place of execution. Those are that is the factual background of the indictment. The prosecution alleges that you, Ramush Haradinaj, are also known as Smajl, and that you were born on the 3rd of July 1968 in Glodjane, in the municipality of Decani, and that at all times relevant to the indictment, you were a commander of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which I will refer to as the KLA, and which I have been referring to as the KLA, and that in addition you had overall command of the KLA forces in one of the KLA operational zones called Dukagjin. Prosecution alleges that you were one of the most senior KLA leaders in Kosovo. This operational zone, according to the prosecutor, encompassed the municipalities of Pejë, Decani, Djakovica, and part of the municipalities of Istok and Klinë. As regards you, Mr. Balaj, according to the indictment, you are also known as Toger or Togeri in your language, or lieutenant, and that you were born on the 23rd of August 1971 in Iglarevo, in the municipality of Klinë in Kosovo. The prosecution alleges that at all times relevant to the indictment, you were a member of the KLA and acted as the commander of the special unit known as the Black Eagles. The prosecution alleges that you were subordinate to co-accused Ramush Haradinaj, reported directly to him, and worked closely with him. As regards you, Mr. Brahimaj, according to the indictment, you are also known as Maksub, or Gypsy, and that you were born on the 26th of January 1970 in Jablanica in the municipality of Djakovica. The prosecutor alleges that you are a close relative of co-accused Ramush Haradinaj, and that at all times relevant to the indictment, you were a member of the KLA and acted as the deputy commander of the Dukagjin operative staff, or as the Dukagjin zone contact person to the KLA general staff. Prosecution alleges also that you were stationed in Jablanica and you were subordinate to co-accused Ramush Haradinaj, reported directly to him and worked closely with him. Basically, when we come to the charges that are being brought against you in the indictment, the prosecution alleges as a mode of criminal responsibility that of a joint criminal enterprise, a mode of committing, of which the three accused, according to Madam Prosecutor, were members. This joint criminal enterprise, according to the indictment, came into existence on or before April 1998, and its raison d'etre was the consolidation of total control of the KLA over the KLA operational zone of Dukagjin by attacking and persecuting certain sections of the civilian population there, namely the unlawful removal of Serb civilians from that area and the forcible, violent suppression of any real or perceived form of collaboration with the Serbs by Albanian or Roma civilians there. The criminal purpose included the intimidation, abduction, imprisonment, beating, torture, and murder of targeted civilians. In sum, accused Ramush Haradinaj is charged with 17 counts of crimes against humanity grounded on Article 5 of this tribunal's statute, and with an additional 20 counts of violations of the laws or customs of war grounded on Article 3 of the statute. of this tribunal. The other two accused, Idriz Balaj and Lahi Brahimaj, are both charged with 16 counts of crimes against humanity based under or on Article 5 of the statute, and with 19 counts of violations of the laws or customs of war under Article 3 of the statute. According to the prosecutor, all crimes alleged in the indictment occurred between the 1st of March of 1998 and the 30th of September of 1998 in the territory of Kosovo and the former Yugoslavia, and were directed against the Serb civilian population and those members of the Albanian and Roma Egyptian civilian population in Decani, Pejë, Djakovica, Istok and Klinë municipalities perceived to be collaborators and not supporting the KLA. By an order dated the 9th of March of this year, the Vice President of this tribunal, Judge Fausto Pocar, assigned this case to Trial Chamber 2, of which I am the presiding judge. 2 days later, on the 11th March 2005, I designated myself as the pre-trial judge for the purposes of today's initial appearance of the three accused. I will now pass on to the procedural proper part of the initial appearance of the three accused, pursuant to Rule 62 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence of this tribunal. And then, having done that, I will move to perhaps what is the most important formality of this appearance, when I will formally charge the three accused and ask them to enter a plea. Mr. Haradinaj, would you please stand up? It is my duty as pre-trial judge to make sure that you are represented legally here. And that's unless, of course, you want to conduct your own defense. I take it from what I heard Mr. Dixon state earlier on, that you are represented not only for the purposes of this initial appearance, but that proceedings are in place for the assigning of counsel for the purpose of the rest of the proceedings. Are you happy with the situation as it obtains now? In other words, are you happy with the representation that you have at your disposal at the moment?
Yes.
I thank you. You may sit down. You may sit down. Mr. Balaj. The same question to you. I heard earlier on Mr. Gregor Guy Smith state that he's been appointed as duty counsel. That's, in other words, he's been assigned to represent you for the purpose of this initial appearance only. I would like a feedback from you on this. I want to know if you are happy with the situation, or whether you would like to make any representations.
For the time being, Mr. Gregory is the one. We'll see how the situation develops in future.
Right. I thank you, sir. You may sit down. Mr. Brahimaj. The same question to you. I heard earlier on Mr. Harvey state that he's been appointed as duty counsel. That's for the purpose of today's initial appearance only. Do you have anything to state about that?
I agree with the appointment of Mr. Harvard.
Thank you. You may sit down. Now the next thing that I have to do is to go through again procedural routine by confirming your identity, basically. Mr. Haradinaj, could you please stand up? Could you give me, please, your full name for the record?
Ramush Haradinaj.
Next question I'm going to ask you, free not to answer it if you like, because it may be an element of proof later on. Do you have any nicknames, or are you known by any nickname?
No, only my name, Ramush Haradinaj. That's how I am known.
Could you give me your date of birth, please?
July the 3rd, 1968.
And where were you born?
In the village of Gllogjan, in the Deçan municipality in Kosovo.
Yes, I am going to ask you for your address, your last address before you came over here. If you prefer to give it in private session, we will go in private session for a while, and you can give me your address. I mean, I don't think this is something that the public ought to be familiar with.
Yeah.
It's your preference. I mean, you tell me what your preference is, or your counsel. I mean, Mr. Dixon, if you want to consult.
Yes, Honour. Could I have one moment just to speak to Mr. Haradinaj?
Thank you very much for the explanation. I prefer to do it in a closed session.
Let's go into private session for a while, please. We are in open session. What is your nationality?
Shqiptar,
Albanian, Kosovar.
Is your family informed about your transfer and detention here in The Hague? You was transferred to and detention in The Hague?
Oh.
Yes.
Would you like me, as an officer of this tribunal, to inform anyone of your transfer and detention here in this tribunal?
No, there is no need for that. Everybody has been informed because everything is possible to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Haradinaj. You may sit down. Mr. Balaj. Same routine with you. Could I have your full name for the record, please?
Balaj. Idriz Balaj.
Idriz Balaj, born on the 23rd of August 1971.
Yes, let's go into private session for a while, and Mr. Balaj will give us his last address before he came over here today. I thank you. And your nationality?
Shqiptar.
Albanian from Kosovo.
Are the members of your family aware that you've been transferred here to The Hague and that you are being kept in a state of detention in the United Nations detention unit here in Scheveningen? Would you like me, as an officer of this tribunal, to inform anyone of your presence here in The Hague?
The interpreter cannot hear.
I think you need to raise your voice a little bit. Is his microphone switched on?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you what? Do you require me to inform anyone of your presence here in The Hague?
No, thank you for all.
Thank you. You may sit down. Mr. Brahimaj, same procedure. Could you please give me your full name for the record?
Lahi Brahimaj.
Yes, Lahi Brahimaj.
Do you have any nicknames?
Your Honour, before you proceed further, might I just have one word with my client on that?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
I was going to advise him on that, too.
Thank you. Thank you. Turn these off. Thank you, Your Honour.
I'm going to ask you whether you have any nickname. You're free to not to answer that question, like every other question for that matter. Would you like to answer that question?
Or Nina?
Yes, my name is Lahi Brahimaj.
Do you have any nicknames? Are you known by any nicknames? I didn't receive any.
The interpreter could not hear.
Could you repeat your answer, please?
Yo.
No.
Right, thank you. When were you born? Your date of birth?
I was born in the village of Jablanica, Gjakovë municipality in Kosovo on the 26th of January 1970.
Your nationality?
Shqiptar I Kosovës.
Albanian from Kosovo.
And are the members of your family informed about your transfer to and your detention here in The Hague?
Yes.
Like me, as an officer of this tribunal, to inform any person of your presence and state of detention here in The Hague?
No, thank you. Everybody knows about it.
Okay, I thank you. Please sit down. Mr. Haradinaj, Mr. Balaj, and Mr. Brahimaj, your arraignment and initial appearance here today before me entails a number of rights. These rights are enshrined in our statute and to an extent also repeated in our rules. I want you to be fully aware of these rights, and for that reason I'm going to ask Mr. Registrar to stand up and read out to you Articles 20 and 21 of the statute of this tribunal, which spell out one by one all these all these rights. Mr. Pimentel.
Article 20, Commencement and Conduct of Trial Proceedings. 1. The trial chambers shall ensure that a trial is fair and expeditious and that proceedings...
Can the speaker slow down, please? The interpreters are asking.
...rights of the accused in due regard for the protection of victims and witnesses. 2.
One moment, Mr. Pimentel. The interpreters would like to slow down, so I would suggest that you start again because they have lost track completely. This is a statute. I suppose you should have a copy of it available. We're reading from Rule 20 and Rule 21, but please do slow down. Also, I take it there was a problem, or were you just referring to what the interpreters?
I was referring to what the interpreters had raised, Your Honor.
I thought so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Pimentel, please.
Commencing again. Article 20, Commencement and Conduct of Trial Proceedings. 1. The trial chambers shall ensure that a trial is fair and expeditious, and that proceedings are conducted in accordance with the rules of procedure and evidence, with full respect for the rights of the accused and due regard for the protection of victims and witnesses. Number 2. A person against whom an indictment has been confirmed shall, pursuant to an order or an arrest warrant of the International Tribunal, be taken into custody, immediately informed of the charges against him, and transferred to the International Tribunal. Number 3. The trial chamber shall read the indictment, satisfy itself that the rights of the accused are respected, confirm that the accused understands the indictment, and instruct the accused to enter a plea. The trial chamber shall then set the date for trial. Number 4. The hearings shall be public unless the trial chamber decides to close the proceedings in accordance with its rules of procedure and evidence. Article 21, Rights of the Accused. 1. All persons shall be equal before the International Tribunal. Number 2. In the determination of charges against him, the accused shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing subject to Article 22 of the statute. Number 3. The accused shall be presumed innocent until proved guilty according to the provisions of the present statute. Number 4. In the determination of any charge against the accused pursuant to the present statute, the accused shall be entitled to the following minimum guarantees in full equality. A. To be informed promptly and in detail in a language which he understands of the nature and cause of the charge against him. B. To have adequate time and facilities for the preparation of his defense and to communicate with counsel of his own choosing. C. To be tried without undue delay. D. To be tried in his presence and to defend himself in person or through legal assistance of his own choosing. To be informed, if he does not have legal assistance, of this right, and to have legal assistance assigned to him in any case where the interests of justice so require, and without payment by him in any such case if he does not have sufficient means to pay for it. E. To examine or have examined the witnesses against him and to obtain the attendance and examination of witnesses on his behalf under the same conditions as witnesses against him. F. To have the free assistance of an interpreter if he cannot understand or speak the language used in the international tribunal. G. Not to be compelled to testify against himself or to confess guilt.
I thank you. Mr. Brahimaj, could you stand up again, please? You did not give us your last address before you arrived here in The Hague. So let's go into a private session for a while, please. Open session. Now, Mr. Haradinaj, could you stand up, please? You heard the registrar read out in full Articles 20 and 21 of the statute of this tribunal, which lay down these rights that you enjoy. They are procedural and substantive rights as an accused before this tribunal. Do you understand the importance of these rights?
Oh.
Yes.
Have you received the indictment in your own language?
Oh.
Yes.
Have you read it?
Oh.
Yes.
Are you aware of its contents, and do you understand the import of the charges that are brought against you?
Oh.
Yes.
All right, you may sit down for the time being. Mr. Balaj, could you stand up, please? I have the same questions for you. First, you heard the registrar read out Articles 20 and 21 as regards the rights that you enjoy as an accused before this tribunal. Do you understand the importance of these rights?
Yes, I understand it.
Have you received the indictment in your own language?
Yes, I have received it.
Did you read it?
Yes.
Do you understand its contents? Are you aware of what you're being charged with and the facts that are alleged against you?
Yes, I have read it and I have everything. I'm aware of everything in it.
Right, thank you, Mr. Balaj. You may sit down. Mr. Brahimaj, the same questions to you. You heard the registrar read out Articles 20 and 21 from the statute of this tribunal, spelling out your procedure and substantive rights as an accused before this tribunal. Do you understand the importance of these rights?
Yes.
Have you been served with the indictment in your own language?
Oh.
Yes.
Read it?
Oh.
Yes.
Are you aware of the charges, the nature of the charges, and the underlying factual allegations contained in this indictment?
Oh.
Yes.
Understand completely what you're being charged with?
Oh.
Yes.
I thank you. You may sit down. According to the rules, I should proceed with the reading out of the indictment in full, unless, of course, there is a waiver forthcoming from the accused. There are 3 accused here, and I need to know where we stand on this. I will start with you, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Your Honour. On behalf of Mr. Haradinaj, there's no need to read the indictment out in full. It's only necessary to read the charges so he can enter his pleas of not guilty. Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Mr. Guy-Smith.
Once again, there's no need to read the indictment out in full, only the charges, so that Mr. Balaj is in a position to enter his pleas of not guilty at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey.
Same goes for Mr. Brahimaj. He fully understands the nature and content of the indictment and is ready to enter his pleas of not guilty forthwith.
Okay, thank you. Now, the procedure will be as follows. I will... Yes, Mr. Harvey.
I apologize. I do see that the transcript actually says his pleas of guilty forthwith, and I would like that to be changed forthwith to not guilty.
Yes, I thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you.
That goes for the record. There is exactly the opposite of what there should be in the transcript. Mr. Harvey said that his client will be pleading not guilty. So I will not be reading out the indictment in full, although I will be going through all the charges or the counts one by one, but very briefly. I wish to make it clear to the 3 accused that pursuant to Rule 62A, small Roman 3 of our rules, you have a right to enter a plea of guilty or a plea of not guilty, or even to remain silent on each count today. If you do not enter a plea, in other words, if you remain silent, or if you prefer not to enter a plea today, our rules allow for an interval of time of 30 days within which you can then enter a plea. 30 days from today. If you don't enter a plea by the end of those 30 days, I will then enter a plea myself on your behalf, a plea of not guilty. I take it that you have all had an opportunity to discuss with your counsel whether you will be entering a plea today and what kind of a plea you will be entering. If that's not the case, please let me know now. I don't see a reaction, which means that I take it that you have discussed this with your counsel. Mr. Haradinaj. As I explained earlier on, you have more charges than the other co-accused. Basically, the first count and the second count relate to you only. So I will be starting with you, and limitedly for the time being to counts 1 and 2. I will tell you the nature of these counts, the charge that is brought against you under each of these 2 counts, and then I will ask you how you would like to plead to these charges. And please tell me, plead not guilty, or I prefer not to plead, as the case may be. Mr. Haradinaj, the first count that is brought against you under this indictment is one of persecution, a crime against humanity punishable under Article 5H of the Statute of this Tribunal. Alternatively, the prosecution is charging you with other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5II of the Statute of this Tribunal, which is also a crime against humanity. How would you like to plead to this first count, guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
I thank you. Mr. Registrar, at the end of this exercise, I will tell you exactly what to put on record. Thank you. The second count which is brought against you, Mr. Haradinaj, in the indictment, is one of cruel treatment, being a violation of the laws and customs of war. And this is punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. How do you wish to plead to this second count, guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
Right now I would ask Mr. Balaj and Mr. Brahimaj to stand up as well. And now we go start from count 3 and go straight to the end. The charges from count 3 to the last count are common to the three of you. So the way I am going to do it is that I will state what the charge is, and then I will ask you one after the other how you would like to plead to each of these counts. In the third count of the indictment, with which you are all charged, the prosecution is alleging that you are criminally responsible of having committed the crime of persecution, which is a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute of this tribunal, and alternatively, it's being alleged that you are criminally responsible for the crime of deportation, pursuant to Article 5D, and also a charge of other inhumane acts, pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, both crimes being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, with regard to this third count, how do you wish to plead, guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this third count, guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
And Mr. Brahimaj, how do you wish to plead to this third count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Let's go to the fourth count, which is one of cruel treatment, which is brought against you as a violation of the laws and customs of war, which is punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this fourth count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this fourth count?
Completely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj, how do you wish to plead to this fourth count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
We go to the fifth count. And the fifth count contains a charge of persecution, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute of this tribunal. Alternatively, prosecution is bringing against you a charge of imprisonment pursuant to Article 5E and a charge of other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, all being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this fifth count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
And you, Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this fifth count? Guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
And Mr. Brahimaj, how do you wish to plead to this fifth count?
Not guilty.
I thank you. We come to the sixth count. And the sixth count contains a charge of cruel treatment, this being a violation of the laws and customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you plead Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
I thank you. Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj, how would you like to plead to this sixth count? Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
Right, I thank you. Count 7. Count 7 is a charge of persecution. Again, it might all seem to be a repetition here, but the facts alleged in these counts amounting to persecution are different in each case. So, seventh count contains a charge of persecution being a crime against humanity, which is punishable, as I said earlier on, under Articles 5H of the statute of this tribunal. Alternatively, the prosecution is alleging that you committed murder pursuant to Article 5A of the statute, this being a crime against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this seventh count? Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
I thank you, Mr. Haradinaj. Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this seventh count? Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj, same question to you. How do you wish to plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
And we come to the eighth count, and the eighth count contains a charge of murder as being a violation of the laws or customs of war punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this eighth count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this eighth count?
Entirely not guilty.
Thank you. And Mr. Brahimaj, how do you wish to plead to this eighth count?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
Right, ninth count, which is one of persecution, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternatively, the prosecution is alleging the crime of murder, which is charged against you pursuant to Article 5A of the statute, this being also a crime against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how would you like to plead to this ninth count? Guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj, guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
And we come to the 10th count, which is also a charge of murder. This time it is alleged that this is in violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
And Mr. Balaj, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
The 11th count again contains a charge of persecution against the three of you. It's being alleged that this is a crime against humanity, punishable under 5H of the statute of this tribunal. Alternatively, you're being charged with murder pursuant as a crime against humanity, pursuant to Article 5A of the statute. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 11th count?
Affirmation.
Not guilty.
And Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
I recognize Mr. Guy Smith.
Thank you so much, Your Honor. With regard to the last plea that my client entered, I believe that we have a bit of a problem. That is on line 18.
Entirely guilty, it says. It should be entirely not guilty. Please, I ask you to be kind enough to follow the transcript, because I can't do this exercise and follow the transcript at the same time. I do thank you. I'm very grateful for your remark, Mr. Guy Smith, and I'm sure that the record at the end will reflect that the accused entered a plea of not guilty and not one of guilty. When I say the accused, I'm referring to Mr. Balaj. We come to the 12th count, which is one of murder, being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of the Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 12th count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
And Mr. Brahimaj, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
And we come to the 13th count, which is a charge of persecution being a crime against humanity punishable under Article 5H of the Statute of the Tribunal. Alternative, the prosecution is charging you with murder and other inhumane acts, both being crimes against humanity, being charged under Article 5A and Article 5I, respectively, of the Statute of this Tribunal. How do you wish to plead to this 13th count, Mr. Haradinaj, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And we come to the 14th count, which contains a charge of murder, being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of our statute. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 14th count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Aye.
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And the 15th count contains a charge of persecution, being a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternative, the prosecution is charging you with murder and other inhumane acts, being crimes against humanity, and pursuant to Article 5A and 5I, respectively, of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 15th count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Balaj, guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
I thank you. 16th count is one of murder, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of this Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, what plea would you like to enter? One of guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And the 17th count is one of persecution, being a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternatively, the prosecutor is bringing against you a charge of murder, pursuant to Article 5A, and a charge of other inhumane acts, pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, all these being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
The 18th count is a charge of murder, this being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of this Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how would you like to plead to this 18th count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
I thank you. We come to the 19th count, which is one of persecution, punishable under Article 5H of the Statute of this Tribunal. Alternatively, the prosecution is bringing against you a charge of murder, pursuant to Article 5A, and a charge of other inhumane acts, pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, all these being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how would you like to plead to this 19th count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Balaj, guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Thank you. 20th count is one of murder, being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of this Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, what's your plea to this 20th charge, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And the 21st count is one of persecution, being a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the Statute of this Tribunal. Alternatively, the prosecution is alleging murder against you, pursuant to Article 5A of the Statute of this Tribunal, all these being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 21st count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And we come to the 22nd count, which is one of murder, being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of this Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how would you like to plead to this 22nd count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And the 23rd count is one of persecution, which is a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternatively, prosecution is alleging or charging you with murder pursuant to Article 5A and the charge of other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, which are also crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 23rd count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Right, we come to the 24th count, which is one of murder, as being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the statute. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 24th count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Come to the 25th count, which is one of persecution, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternatively, the prosecution is alleging murder, which is charged against you pursuant to Article 5A of the statute, these being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how would you like to plead to this 25th count of persecution? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And the 26th count is one of murder, a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of the Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Right, thank you. 27th count is one of persecution, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternatively, the prosecution is charging you with other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5I of the statute. All these are crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Right, thank you. 28th count is one of cruel treatment, this being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of this Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 28th count, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Okay, I thank you. 29th count which is also one of cruel treatment and also being a violation of the laws and customs of war, of course based on different facts. This is punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 29 count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this 29 count? Guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj, same question to you.
Not guilty.
And we come to count 30, which contains a charge of murder, this being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, what's your plea?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Thank you. 31st count is one of persecution, this being a crime against humanity punishable under Article 5H of the statute of this tribunal. Alternatively, the prosecution is alleging that you committed murder pursuant to Article 5A of the statute, and the charge is bringing also against you a charge of other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, all these being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
I thank you. 32nd count is one of murder, this being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj, how do you wish to plead to this 32nd count? Guilty or not guilty?
Entirely not guilty.
And Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
And we come to the 33rd count, which is one of cruel treatment, this being a violation of the laws or customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 33rd count?
Not guilty.
And Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
34th count is one of persecution, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute. Alternatively, the prosecution is charging you with other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, which is also a crime against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 34th count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty. Not guilty.
I thank you. And the 35th count against you is a charge of persecution, a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 5H of the statute of this tribunal. Alternatively, the prosecution is charging you with rape pursuant to Article 5G and a charge of other inhumane acts pursuant to Article 5I of the statute, both being crimes against humanity. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 35th count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
And Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
Count 36, this is a charge of rape, being a violation of the laws or customs of war, which is punishable under Article 2 and Article 3 of the statute of this tribunal according to the indictment. I'm not going into whether Article 2 is pleaded against you in this case or not. Mr. Haradinaj, I'm sure your lawyers will take this up later on. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 36th count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
We come to the last count, which is the 37th count, which is one of cruel treatment, a violation of the laws and customs of war, punishable under Article 3 of the Statute of the Tribunal. Mr. Haradinaj, how do you wish to plead to this 37th count? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Okay. Mr. Balaj?
Entirely not guilty.
Mr. Brahimaj?
Not guilty.
I thank you. You may sit down. Mr. Registrar, I should like to ask you to enter for the record that the three accused pleaded not guilty to each and every one of the counts brought against them in the indictment. I thank you. Having said so, I wish to inform you, Mr. Haradinaj, Mr. Balaj, and Mr. Haradinaj, that at any time from now onwards, you are entitled to change your plea. You can change your plea to one of guilty to all the charges, or you can change your plea to one of guilty to some of the charges. That's up to you. Before I proceed, I also wish to draw your attention to one of the rules that we have, and that is Rule 63. And I'm going to read it out to you so that you will be fully aware of it, particularly since some of you do not yet have counsel assigned to them. Rule 63, first paragraph, states, questioning by the prosecutor of an accused, including after the initial appearance, shall not proceed without the presence of counsel unless the accused has voluntarily and expressly agreed to proceed without counsel being present. If the accused subsequently expresses a desire to have counsel, questioning shall thereupon cease and shall only resume when the accused's counsel is present. The second paragraph of Rule 63 states that the questioning, including any waiver of the right to counsel, shall be audio recorded or video recorded in accordance with the procedure provided for in Rule 43. The prosecutor shall, at the beginning of the questioning, caution the accused in accordance with Rule 42A, small Roman 3, which basically prosecution needs to caution you that you have the right to remain silent. No one can force you to incriminate yourselves, and that anything you may say may be used in evidence. Mr. Haradinaj, Mr. Balaj, and Mr. Haradinaj, I will very soon, after this sitting, appoint a pre-trial judge who will schedule a status conference to be held within 120 days from today, pursuant to Rule 65 bis A of the Rules of Procedure of this tribunal. The purpose of the status conference is twofold. First, it is to organize exchanges between the parties and facilitate expeditious preparation for trial. Secondly, the pre-trial judge will have an opportunity to see you in person and to ensure that you are being treated well and to be made aware of any complaints or requests that you may have. You will later on be informed of the exact date of this status conference, which will be fixed by the pre-trial judge that I will appoint. In addition, I will be giving instructions to the registrar to start preparing a date for the trial when appropriate. Of course, please do not interpret what I have just said, that the trial will start in a very short time. There will be all the time needed, required to be taken first before a trial date can be fixed. But it will be fixed at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, I have signed an order to the effect that you will remain in custody for the time being. I wish to advise you that in terms of Rule 65 of our Rules of Procedure and Evidence, you may at any time file an application for provisional release, which will of course be dealt with after hearing what the prosecution has to say. I'm sure that now and later your respective defense counsel will be able to assist you on this. I turn to my left, and Madam, I wish to remind you that pursuant to Rule 66A1 of the Rules of Procedure, you have 30 days from today to make available to the respective defense counsel in a language which the accused understands all the supporting material which accompanied the indictment when confirmation was sought by your office. If there are any problems, or that if you anticipate any problems in regard, please speak now.
Your Honor, the prosecution is aware of its obligation and will act accordingly. However, I have, of course, inquired with the translation section. It will be difficult for them, given their limited resources, but I'm quite confident that we still have everything in the language that the accused understand.
All right. And then there is obviously the question of defense counsel, because I cannot anticipate how long it's going to take the registrar to assign counsel to each and every one of the accused. I mean, from the looks of it, it's only Mr. Dixon that appears on the horizon for the time being. So that may occasion the need for an extension of the time if there is no counsel, unless the parties, the accused themselves, wish to have these documents delivered to them personally. But we'll come to that, or the pre-trial judge that I will appoint will deal with that in due course. I thank you, Madam. I wish to remind also the three accused and respective duty counsel present here that pursuant to Rule 72A of our rules, the defense has a period of 30 days for the filing of any preliminary pleas, any preliminary motions. Once, however, you have been served with all the supporting material at the basis of the indictment in accordance with Rule 66 mentioned earlier. So I don't need to expand or explain this. I'm pretty much sure that you are fully aware of this. We come to the close. Madam Prosecutor, is there any matter that you would like to raise at the moment? At this
No, Your Honor, nothing arises.
I thank you. Is there any matter that the defense for Mr. Haradinaj or the accused himself, for that matter, wish to raise at this stage?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor did mention Rule 65 and provisional release. There will be no application made at this hearing today, but I did wish to inform the court that such an application will be made for Mr. Haradinaj's provisional release in the near future. I will also speak to my learned colleagues from the prosecution about this to move the matter forward as quickly as possible. The basis for the application will be that his case is entirely unprecedented for a serving Prime Minister to immediately, once he heard about the indictment, resign from his position on the same day and to voluntarily hand himself over to the United Nations and the ICTY. He has cooperated fully and within the space of a few days has arrived here in The Hague. Your Honour, there will be a formal motion submitted setting out these grounds together with the necessary guarantees in the near future. I just wish to bring it to the Court's attention that that is the first application that will be made on his behalf as soon as possible.
Right.
Thank you, Your Honour.
I thank you, Mr. Dixon. We'll wait for that motion. That, of course, is something which will be dealt with by the full trial chamber. Is there any matter that the defense counsel for Mr. Balaj or the accused himself wish to raise at this stage?
Yes, Your Honor, there are two things I wish to inform the court as well as the prosecutor of. In my conversations with Mr. Balaj, I have informed him of his right to have counsel present at all proceedings, and it is my understanding and my interpretation of the rule with regard to any questioning that might occur that during my tenure as duty counsel, I am that counsel and would inform any individuals who may seek to have any kind of interview with my client that they may not do so unless I am first informed of such a thing, and then we will make a determination whether or not it's appropriate. With regard to the issues concerning Rule 72, I do appreciate precisely what Your Honor has said. There are some concerns, however, that do exist, and they have arisen before, and I just wish to alert you to those potential difficulties. If I remain in the position that I am now, and my status changes, then I am more than happy to undertake any motions that need to be filed in the initial phases after obtaining complete disclosure of those supporting documents. However, I think it imprudent and would be filing a motion evidencing such concern if by that time permanent counsel does not exist for Mr. Balaj, because I believe that permanent counsel is in a better position looking at the entirety of the case to make a determination what appropriate motion should be filed. It's not only a legal matter but also a matter of strategy.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Guy Smith, I wouldn't preempt any issues for the time being. I am not in a position to know when counsel will be assigned to your client and who will be assigned to your client. Obviously, everything will rotate on that as a factor, plus the date or the time when the prosecution would fulfill its obligations under Rule 66.
I appreciate your comment, sir.
And if there is need for extensions, obviously, the last thing that you should think of is that the trial chamber would be unreasonable in considering your motions or those of your successor, if there will be a successor.
And again, thank you.
Thank you. And I turn to you, Mr. Harvey. Is there any matter that you, or for that matter, your client would like to raise at this stage?
Your Honour, all I would say at this stage is that with reference to the possibility of an application for pre-trial release, Your Honour has already said clearly on the record that my client voluntarily surrendered himself the moment the indictment was made public, and I do anticipate that at some stage application will be made in that respect. In addition, I would echo exactly what Mr. Guy Smith has just said. I am currently duty counsel, and until any other counsel is appointed by my client or on his behalf, I have advised him of his right not to be questioned by anybody on behalf of the prosecution, and I would expect that the normal courtesies would be extended. In other words, that nobody would seek to interview with my client without first approaching me and informing me of their intention to do so.
I thank you, Mr. Harvey. Mr. Haradinaj, could you stand up, please? You've been here a few days. I would like to know, or to make sure, that you have been treated well. during your stay here in The Hague?
Everything has been fine and I've been treated with dignity.
I thank you. Is there any complaint? Is there any complaint that you would like to make? Or are there any concerns, could be also health concerns that you would like me to be aware of?
The health service and everything has been of the highest service. There's nothing in particular that I wish to point to.
Right, I thank you. You may sit down. Mr. Balaj. Again, I want to make sure that since your arrival here in The Hague, you have been treated well. That's my first question to you.
Everything has been fine.
Is there anything that you would like to tell me? Any complaint, any requests? Except to send you home?
Nothing for the moment.
Okay, thank you. You may sit down. Mr. Brahimaj, same question to you. Have you been treated well since your arrival here in The Hague?
Yes, everything is fine.
And do you have any complaints or any remarks or any special requests that you would like to address to me?
No.
Thank you. You may sit down. That brings today's initial appearance to an end. Next, there will be, as I explained earlier, the appointment by myself of the pre-trial judge and, of course, the first status conference, which you expect to happen within 120 days starting from today. I thank you all. Good morning.
All rise, veuillez vous lever.